If you end up liking this video and finding it helpful, then give it a thumbs up and leave your comments below about what your experiences are of using this video. And also, if you haven't already, click the subscribe button and the bell button near the subscribe button so that you can be kept informed when future videos like this go live. Close your eyes as I tell you the story about an adventure of a time-travelling worm. So with your eyes closed, you can listen to me reading this story. And while I read this story, you can begin to feel relaxed. And as I read, you can imagine this story and begin to drift off to sleep. As you drift off asleep, you can continue this story in a dream. And my reading will help you feel sleepy. It will help you feel tired. And it will help you fall asleep. Sid was an interesting worm. He wasn't like other worms. Wormholes he made led to other points in time, not just in space. One day when it was raining outside, Sid was keeping warm and dry in a wormhole. He could hear the pitter-patter of falling rain on the soil above, but he remained comfortable in his hole. Sid found the sound of rain relaxing. He enjoyed lying in his wormhole with his eyes closed, listening to the sound of the rain, which made him drift deeper and deeper into a relaxed, dreamy state. Sid didn't like going out into the rain because he was only little. Raindrops seemed really big to him. If a raindrop hit him, it would hurt. As a worm, Sid also didn't like it when it was too hot and sunny, because it would get too dry and he would get sunburnt. He liked a nice grey day, just after the rain, when the soil would be moist and easy to dig through, and the air fresh and clean. Once the rain stopped, Sid decided to go outside and see what the weather was like. As he poked his head out of the hole, he saw that it was clear and dry, and the ground was still nice and damp. Sid slithered out of his wormhole and around the ground. He wondered what he was going to do today. Every time Sid burrowed into the ground, he created a wormhole. And when he burrowed out of the wormhole that he had created, it could lead anywhere. He never knew where he would come out. Sid sometimes enjoyed creating time-travelling wormholes. Other times he wished he could be like other normal worms. Sid burrowed into the ground, and the deeper he went, the darker it got. He continued burrowing deeper and deeper. Then, after digging deep into the ground, Sid turned upwards again and began to dig up to the surface. It was always a scary and exciting experience, not knowing what he would discover when he reached the surface. As Sid approached the surface, he could hear the sound of hundreds of fast-moving footsteps. It sounded like a stampede. When Sid poked his head out of the wormhole, he saw hundreds of horses galloping around with cowboys on them. It looked like Sid had appeared in the Wild West. Sid didn't like the Wild West. It was too dry. He wanted to get out of here. Just as he went to turn and head back to where he had come from, he saw a big black bird trying to grab a worm from the ground. The other worm was trying to hide from the bird. But it wasn't going to be able to hide for long. Sid knew that he had to do something, but he didn't know what. He didn't have control over his time-travelling abilities, so he couldn't dig his way over to the other worm to save them. If only it was that easy. Sid tried to carefully slide over to the other worm without being noticed. As he got closer and closer, he could see the bird was noticing movement. The bird hadn't yet noticed it was a worm moving, but it was clearly aware that something was moving. Suddenly, the bird started coming for Sid. Sid quickly burrowed into the ground. As he burrowed up to the surface again, he didn't know where he was going to be. He knew he could go back out the way he'd just come in, but the bird might be there waiting for him. He burrowed up to the surface, and as he approached the surface, he listened closely to try to find out where he was. He couldn't hear any noise. As he poked his head out of the wormhole and looked around, he saw men in ninja suits creeping around. Sid thought to himself, I wish I had the skills of a ninja. Then I could save that other worm. Sid watched as the ninja silently moved past and disappeared into the shadows. He began burrowing again. He dug down deeper and deeper into the soil, just where he had done before. If he could find out how to control his time-travelling ability, then he could easily save the other worm. He wondered if digging deeper or shallower could change where he travelled in time. When Sid dug back up to the surface this time, he found himself in a futuristic world. Cars didn't have wheels, they hovered off the ground. They also drove themselves. There were tall towers as tall as the sky, stretching all the way up into the clouds. And there were lots of plants and animals. Sid had travelled 200 years into the future. In this time, robots did most of the work, it seemed, and people got to spend all their time having fun and playing. The people loved spending time out in nature. Sid liked this world, but he couldn't stay here. He had to burrow again. Sid burrowed down again, digging deeper and deeper, before tunnelling back up to the surface. This time he came out in the middle of a carnival. There was coloured string and confetti everywhere. This gave Sid an idea. He decided to get some of the coloured string and take it back with him to the Wild West. Sid went back down the hole he had just come out of, where he'd popped out in the future. He then went over to the other hole he'd come out of, where he'd seen the ninjas. He then went down that hole and carefully popped his head up in the Wild West. He pushed the coloured string out in front of him. As he was pushing the string out, the bird's beak grabbed it. The bird was clearly distracted by the string, trying to work out what it was. While the bird was distracted, Sid quietly slid over to the other worm to rescue it. He wrapped his tail around the other worm and pulled it to safety under the cart. "Oh, thank you, the other worm said. "I'm Felicity. Thank you for saving me." Sid told Felicity that they would have to get away from the bird before he came bored with the string and came looking for them. Sid dug down into the soil, closely followed by Felicity. He didn't know how she would react when they exited the wormhole and she discovered that they were no longer in the Wild West. Sid didn't spend much time with other worms. He didn't really have any friends, but Felicity seemed to quite like him. He hoped she wouldn't be scared and put off him because he was different. Sid began digging up towards the surface again. As he poked his head out of the surface, he saw that he was in a beautiful garden full of colourful plants and plenty of soft soil to dig through. Felicity popped her head out of the hole and was confused and amazed, wondering where they were and what had happened. Sid explained about being a time-travelling worm that could dig wormholes. Felicity didn't seem bothered by this at all. She still wanted to be with Sid. She said they could stay living in this beautiful garden together. Sid said he didn't think that was possible because he never knew where his wormholes would go. Felicity told him that she could make all the wormholes for them to live in, and he could make wormholes to different places, and they would always have this garden to come back to. Sid was happy with this, and the two of them lived in the garden happily ever after.